Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, coming to you, not live, but recording on this lovely Monday. And people, I just hope you're ready for an hour of Josh Gordon to the Chiefs. Goodness, maybe not quite that long, but I am happy that my guy has got another chance. We got Dwain McFarland, as always, sitting by. He is not sharing my flash optimism, but you know what? That's okay, Dwain. I still like you as both a person and a colleague. What's going on, man?
Man, hey, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth the Chiefs taking a look at because I think it's pretty apparent at this point that Michael Hardman is just not the answer, And when I'm watching that team, I'm constantly thinking, man, they need a third weapon. Like, they just need a third weapon because they're trying to do it by letting, Mahomes scramble. They tried to get, even Edwards-Helaire a little more involved, but they just need another downfield weapon. And so I see no reason to not just try to kick the tires on Josh Gordon. Do I think it's going to be a huge boon for fantasy leagues? Probably not. But, if you're playing on the Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes, if you're in a super deep league, I mean, I've kicked the tire on worse things, as a fantasy manager in the past. So yeah, we'll hop in. I know we'll spend some time on Josh Gordon because this is Ian's podcast.
I want that PFF social graphic with Gordon in a Chiefs uniform, man. It just says, I've kicked tires on worse players, Dwain McFarland. That's exactly what I want out of you, Dwain. Great stuff, as always. People on our waiver wire edition of this podcast, we're going to go through quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, talk about more people than just Josh Gordon, believe it or not. And we will kick things off with the QB position. Now, Dwain, I went through guys, and again, everyone I mentioned here on today's podcast is going to be rostered around 50% of Yahoo or Fantrax leagues. So that's kind of the disclaimer I'm going for. If you hear me, not mentioning someone, there's a good chance they are higher than that 50% threshold. So with that in mind, Dwain, 5 quarterbacks really sticking out this week to me in Streamerland. Sam Darnold is facing the Cowboys. Derek Carr's got the Chargers. Justin Fields has the Lions. Daniel Jones has the Saints. And Teddy Bridgewater has the Ravens. I'll quickly run through my kind of general thoughts here. I think the order of these guys should be: first up, Derek Carr. This man has thrown for 300 plus yards in 7 straight games at this point, as you said last week, Dwain. And, we just kind of came to the agreement. He has earned inclusion as a borderline QB1 at worst here moving forward. The matchups haven't been great. They're still not great. The Chargers with Derwin and Joey Bosa are a very good defense, but people, he's throwing the hell out of the ball and he's doing a great job with it. Weapons all over the place. Keep trusting Derek Carr, even in a less than ideal matchup. And I am going Carr over Sam Darnold, one of these few quarterbacks that when you lose their running back, it might actually be a bit of a net negative, I think, for the passing game. Darnold should be okay, but he's also not going to run for 2 touchdowns every single week like he did last week. So just realize, people, as great as much better as Darnold has been, I had to catch myself there, compared to past years, QB 16, QB 14, and QB 7 starts the season. He is fine as an upside QB 2. Like, I'm not saying he's even going to be ranked that much further below Derek Carr. I would just take Carr ahead of Darnold because I think it's more sustainable over the years, but over the upcoming weeks, I should say. But hey, Darnold, next 5 opponents: Cowboys, Eagles, Vikings, Giants, Falcons. It's going to be like week 12 on here, Dwain. I'm going to be going, I told you, Darnold just had a mediocre game. I've been waiting for this all season long. After that, I have Fields, Daniel Jones, and Teddy Bridgewater. Honestly, I might even be overthinking it in terms of Jones versus Fields. With Teddy, I just think it's not enough of a pass-happy offense, despite him having the higher average target depth this year, to really feel good about a matchup against the Ravens, where I think the blitz-happy nature of that defense could cause some problems for Teddy. He does hold the ball a lot, so I'm just not loving this spot for him. But the Jones versus Fields thing, I'm not trying to take anything away from Daniel Jones. Only Lamar Jackson has more rushing yards than him this year. He is PFF's 4th highest graded passer. But I'm just, actually, this is like a non-quantifiable thing, which makes me nervous that I'm hanging my hat on it. But Dwain, this is the Saints' first game back in the Superdome this year. And I know you remember that, return to the stadium after Hurricane Katrina when that place was going absolutely electric. And I don't know. I don't exactly trust Daniel Jones and Jason Garrett to walk into that environment and come away with this. So again, maybe I'm just overthinking that. But either way, I would take Carr and Darnold ahead of these other streamer options. How do you feel about this group of 5, Dwain?
Yeah, I think you have it for sure correct at the top. I do think it is Carr, number 1, and then I think it's Darnold, number 2. The nice thing with Darnold, is you're sitting at, QB 9 right now without, minus Monday night game tonight. on the season, and they haven't really been forced to throw the ball that much yet, Ian. And I mean, you were really doing a good job of outlining like the next opponents, right? They could really have to do a lot more when they're not playing, some of the lesser offenses in the league. But if you look at them, I mean, they still rank sixth in plays per game right now, but that's mostly due to being number 2 in time of possession on the season. So their plays per minute are 27th out of 32. So it'll be interesting to see. Like, most likely what you usually see is teams that trail a lot run a lot more plays, right? And then teams that are leading, they try to slow it down at the end of the game. They just, you don't want, 90 plays in a game if you don't have to, right? It's just bad for player health. So I do think we'll see the pace pick up if they're in games where they need it to. But what I like is if you look at their pass rate in close games, they're 10th in the league, and they're 15th in the league in passing even when leading by 4 points or more for the Panthers. So I do like that. Those are both positive things. So that puts me in a situation where I rank Darnold second as well. I hate to just disagree. I hate to just agree with you, Ian. But yeah, I would put Darnold there. And then, man, the thing with Fields, we don't even know who the starter's going to be this week now. With Nagy coming out and doing what he's doing. So,
Nick Foles, oh my goodness.
Man, yeah, it's if Fields plays, like, I'm willing to give him another shot, because the thing, and we've talked about it multiple times, so I don't have to keep rehashing it, but the thing we care about the most, design rushing attempts, he's sitting at 15% for the team on the season. In the 2 games where he's played most of the game, 21% and 17%. And then his scrambles are sitting just under 10% per drop back on the season when he's been out there. So that's still going to carry you many weeks. It just, it didn't last week, so I'm open to the fact that, look, there can always be exceptions to these rules. It's just been a really hard rule to break. Now, when you throw for, 50 yards, that can break rules. So I would probably, to your point, man, it's tough for me to say, but it's I would probably lean a little bit to Daniel Jones, just at least for this week, over Fields. And I know it is New Orleans, but we just don't know for sure what's going to happen with Fields. But if you're asking me for rest of the season, I would still hang my hat probably on Fields. The thing that keeps Jones there, man, is he's been running just as much. We did not expect Daniel Jones to run the ball on 18% of design rush plays, scramble on 8% of dropbacks. He's got his sack rates down. It's still higher than the elites, but it's down to a 6%. He's handling 33% of the attempts inside the 5 for the team. So, Daniel Jones has a great rushing floor every week too. So actually, having said that, I'll just flip it now. Because we know Daniel Jones is the starter for his team, he's basically getting the stuff, everything we hope Justin Fields gets. Now Fields, if he continues to get that rushing volume and he is the starter, we know he's just a more electric runner than Daniel Jones. That's the thing that gets us going, is we know that, man, when we see Justin Fields out there running the ball that much, there's a real chance that we get these 80 and 100-yard rushing weeks. And, Daniel Jones, yeah, you could get that every once in a while, but more than likely what you're looking at is 40 to 50 yards on his utilization. So I think the order is right. I actually don't disagree with any of it. I think you've got it. I would flip Jones and Fields for now, but other than that, I would have Bridgewater also last. The one quick thing with the Broncos, I threw a tweet out there about this morning. Something has to give with them. They're the absolute worst in plays per minute, but they've also led 61% of their plays. That's the first in the league, and they're first in time of possession in the NFL. So it'll be interesting, because this is Vic Fangio head coach, and we know these defensive-minded head coaches will sometimes, they'll have their thumb on the offensive coordinator. So we'll see what happens whenever they actually get into a situation where they're having to trail. Do they get to throw the ball more, or does that pace stay lethargic, and now with less time of possession, it really plummets the offense? That's my one fear with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback.
Yeah, and for Teddy to have only faced Giants, Jaguars, and Jets so far, we're giving Darnold so much crap for not having faced the toughest of schedules. You could say a lot of those same things about the Denver Broncos. And thinking about this more, the fact that we do have to put in our waivers on Tuesday or Wednesday before Matt Nagy's going to give us the actual answer to who's under center, yeah, it needs to be Daniel Jones by default with that. I did not consider that. That's why I like to talk these things through on the podcast. So people, Derek Carr number 1, Sam Darnold number 2, Daniel Jones number 3, Justin Fields number 4, Teddy number 5. Final note I'll make on Fields. I think I'm with you, Dwayne. Let's hold. Let's not cut the guy after one bad week just yet. hold tight, because as terrible as last week was, like, it was a terrible team-wide performance. I just refuse to believe everything can go that wrong again. Again, this was like the third worst performance of the past 21 years in terms of total yards against the Browns defense that is good. And Myles Garrett is exceptional, but this was just a complete stinker among stinkers, and we can't just expect that to be the new normal. Fields was pressured on 53% of his dropbacks, even though his average release time, 2.84 seconds, is high. But for him, man, we were looking like well over 3 seconds in the preseason and at Ohio State. So the O-line wasn't helping. And then only 28% of his targets were to receivers that PFF deemed open or wide open. When he was targeting those guys, he went 3 for 4. The problem was every other quarterback in the league is up over 40%. So that tells me the receivers weren't doing a great job and Matt Nagy wasn't doing a great job play calling. Fields didn't do a great job with any of this either. I'm just saying the whole root of the problems goes a little bit more than just Fields. So hold tight another week. Hopefully we get that same dual threat player that we've been hyping up the all offseason for good reasons. Moving on to running back, big five here, and again, just rostered around 50% of the league. So Alexander Mattison, of course, would be number one, if or maybe one or two, just depending on Dalvin Cook's status. Try to find a way to get Madison on your bench if you're somehow in a league where he's not rostered, but I find that hard to believe after last week. Anyway, the big five that I got: Chuba Hubbard, J.J. Taylor, Peyton Barber, Zack Moss, and Giovanni Bernard. Just really quickly over this group. I mean, Dwayne, I was just putting together some of my running back snap stuff for my article that goes out on Wednesday. And yeah, Brandon Bolden not only outsnapped and outplayed J.J. Taylor after James White suffered a hip injury, but Bolden was even on the field longer than Damian freaking Harris. So I'm not sure that's going to persist. Just realize J.J. Taylor isn't necessarily the next man up here. We still have Ramondre Stevenson, who could be active now that White's out of the picture. Maybe Bolden keeps the job. Maybe Harris takes the hell over. Either way, it's the ever-evolving Patriots backfield. Don't be going crazy on Taylor. Deeper leagues, fine, but using more than 8% of your fab couldn't be me there. With Peyton Barber, tied for third in carries in the entire freaking NFL over the past 2 weeks. Josh Jacobs, he's not in the IR or anything. I think he's going to be back. It would be hysterically painful if Barber continues to carve out a role in the committee even after Jacobs is back. I'm almost wondering if it's likely at this point, as sad as that is. Either way, I'm not chasing this, Dwayne, because it's going to come to an end very quick, and this is not fantasy-friendly usage. Zack Moss, hey, Matt Breida, healthy scratch last week. That's great to see. Again, we can live with the 2 RB backfields, and Moss is starting to get some work ahead of Singletary. I would say he is someone that I'm a little more inclined to spend, maybe up to 10. It's a little bit more fab if you're in a dire place. I know the 0 RB teams could be hurting right now, so you could do worse than someone getting 10 touches on the offense. Giovanni Bernard, per Bruce Arians, he doesn't know if Gio is going to be back until Wednesday. He's dealing with that knee injury. Bucks will use Lundy more otherwise. And that basically sets the table for Chuba, who is on everyone's mind. So, Dwayne, I'll give you the floor here, but again, just quickly, I guess, before you get to Chuba, out of these other guys, I would say Moss number 1. Probably J.J. Taylor number 2, because I don't see Barber's upside moving forward, and then Barber and Gio. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I think Hubbard's at the top, and then depending on Madison's status, he would be number 2, yeah. Right? But if you're just trying to win this week, but we need to hear. We probably won't know enough for you to make that kind of call. So I agree. I would put Zack Moss at number 2, and honestly, Chuba's still going to be the play, but if you're looking for a back like that you just want to roster for the rest of the year because you've got 3 solid backs and you just want to have a 4th that has a role that could step in, fill in a bye week in a pinch, and maybe could continue to grow what they have, that's probably Zack Moss, and you can get him for less than Chuba Hubbard. Hubbard is the player that, as long as CMC's out, you're going to be able to put him into your starting lineup. So if you look at, just last week, once, Christian McCaffrey left the game, 73% of the snaps, handled 100% of the long down and distance, 66% of the short down and distance, 100% of the 2-minute offense, handled roughly half of the attempts, but one attempt went to a tight end / fullback and Trimble, one went to a receiver. So if you look at it just against the backs, it was closer to 60%, of the attempts with just he and Royce Freeman, right? Darnold had a couple of carries as well, including the rushing touchdown. So routes per pass play is really way up there. This is beautiful, 72%, targets 22%, and he was targeted on 22% of the routes that he was out, for Darnold. So Yeah, I mean, it's like we always say, Ian, volume is king. And until CMC comes back, you could have basically you're getting a mid-level RB2 with every week RB1 upside on that volume, if that volume holds true. And we don't really have a reason to think that it shouldn't, given the way that they utilize Mike Davis. I do expect Royce Freeman to be involved some. He was involved some in this game, but I think it's going to be about to the extent that we saw in this game. I think they do like Chuba. Could Freeman eventually take over more work from him if he doesn't play well? Yeah, but all we have is this to go off of. And I would definitely be putting, on Chuba, and I haven't heard anything new on CMC, so you tell me if I'm wrong, Ian, but I'm still assuming that even though they haven't put him on IR, I'm still assuming that, CMC, based on everything that I've read, we're talking, 2 to 5 weeks that he's going to miss, depending on how severe the injury is. So if you just put that somewhere in the middle and say you're going to get 3.5 games, somewhere around there, 3 to 4 games out of this player, if you're rostering Christian McCaffrey, I'm such a boomer. If you're rostering Christian McCaffrey, over 50% is what you're going to have to go over 50%. I think you'll have to be over 60% unless you're in a small league. If you are in a 12-team league with 20-plus team rosters, it's going to be over 60% no matter what, whether you own CMC or not, because the CMC owner is going to go hard at Chuba if he's available. And he's not available a lot of times in those really large leagues. Like I've not left him available on any wire. Like I've scooped him up anywhere he's been available like weeks ago. So it's not like he's going to be there a ton. If you're in a smaller format like an 8-team league, you don't have to go that much, but you know your situation better than Ian and I do. So if you're sitting there with one back and you don't have anybody at RB2, maybe James White was your RB2 and you're just trying to get through on him, and maybe maybe you got Pollard sitting there and he can give you a little something, but you don't have a true number 2. Well, then you got to right size your bid based on that and just try to win the next 2 to 4 weeks with Hubbard, and give yourself some time for other things to develop.
This is why preseason does matter, people. At least the first team snap rates do. If you guys listen to Dwain and I throughout August, every single preseason takeaway podcast was basically jerking off Chuba Hubbard's snap rate usage because he was out there almost every single play with the first team offense, to the extent that we felt comfortable moving him up in to the Alexander Madison, Pollard, Kareem Hunt tier of those best handcuffs in the league. So yeah, Mike Davis was the RB12 last year, all season long, full PPR scoring. And, I personally think Mike is one of the more shifty runners out there. I think, in a world where if we want to rank, how good RBs actually are, I do think Mike Davis is legit good. But hey, Chuba, even if he's 90% Mike Davis, that's still going to be, to your point, an upside RB2 with legit RB1 potential. So go get Chuba. After him, again, people, Zack Moss, Taylor, Barber, and Gio. Dwain, I feel like, though, again, hopefully people have Chuba on your bench and you have already. This isn't a situation like Elijah Mitchell. To me, that was like, hey, I'm comfortable spending 53% fab because I'm getting, hopefully, the 49ers starting running back the rest of the season. I know he suffered a shoulder injury next week. We couldn't predict that. With Chuba, I don't want to spend over 50% on my fab on a guy that likely will be back to being a backup in 2 to 5 weeks. The only update we have received is that McCaffrey won't be going on the IR. So it's 2 to 5 with maybe the more likely scenario being around 2 or 3 weeks. Are you with me there? We're this is not a situation to overly freak out.
Yeah. And yeah, what I'm just trying to let people understand is you're going to have to beat the CMC owner. And I do believe the CMC owner or manager is going to have enough incentive, right, to go ahead and plop down probably half of their fab, unless you look at their roster and they're loaded at running back. Meaning, even with Hubbard on the roster, let's say, for example, they got Najee Harris in the second, DeAndre Swift in the third, and then came back and grabbed, somebody else, in the 8th or 9th round, or maybe, they've got a Naheem Hines and a James, a player like that as well. If you saw that, then you could say, okay, maybe they're not going to go that high. I can right size, my fab allocation to maybe 30%, which would be a lot better. That's really what you would rather do. Typically, the way I look at these situations is what's the range of outcomes I think I get production from the player on, and then I size that. So if I think it's a quarter of the season, then I basically size that against my fab dollars. And I'm like, okay, if I think this is an elite player as far as utilization goes for 25% of my fantasy season, right, which is typically 12 weeks, then I'm like, okay, 25% is probably the max I should put on the player. But knowing the way that the zero RB folks have been going at the wire this year, I do believe in a lot of leagues it will take 50% plus to get him. But if you're doing the right thing, and let's say you play in 5 leagues, I mean, I think the right way to approach it is put 25 to 35% on him every time, and maybe you get him once or twice, and you don't get him, the other 4 times.
Like that call. Moving on to wide receiver, 2 quick notes on it. Guys that won't help you here in week 4, but maybe they will in a major way down the line. Ravens rookie wide receiver Rashod Bateman is eligible to come off IR. Will begin practicing this week per John Harbaugh. Same goes with Miles Boykin. So, hey, a lot of believers out there that Bateman could be the legit wide receiver 1 on this Ravens team. He's going to have to work his way up the depth chart. It's not a guarantee. But, hey, if you have an IR spot in your league, you can do a lot worse than getting Bateman now before we potentially see the value really go sky high once people realize he should be back soon. And the same goes for Michael Gallup, who was spotted on September 23rd working with some resistance bands on the field. He's going to miss the Monday night game. That happened yesterday as you're listening to this, which I shouldn't have brought up, but that's what happens when you record on Mondays. And then he's also going to miss the week 4 game. So Gallup won't be back until week 5. But again, people, if you can go get him on IR, this is a guy that was going as a top 40 receiver in fantasy drafts, a month ago. And now you can hopefully get him for free if someone wasn't patient enough to keep him. So Gallup and Bateman, go get him in an IR spot if you're able. The rest of the group, I don't think there's, last week, Dwayne, we were saying Sterling Shepard must get, we got to quit saying guys are must gets. They get hurt immediately, seemingly. I don't think there's really anyone on the waiver at wide receiver. You need to have certainly some guys that could provide you some boom weeks here moving forward. The list that I got, Emmanuel Sanders, he's looked 100% out there. I mean, this guy is not aging, which is great to see. And Josh Allen really had his best game of the year by far with those 5 total touchdowns against Washington. So, Dwayne, what did you had like a name I thought for these types, the Manny Sanders, the Cole Beasleys. Like, you're not getting the sky high wide receiver 1 possibility, but you're getting guys in a good offense that can get you like 7-8 targets per week. Emmanuel Sanders, Christian Kirk, they both apply.
Yeah, for sure. They're both players that you're happy to stick into your wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4 spot, is the way I look at it, or one of your flex spots. Mm-hmm. As you wait on some of the younger players on your team to potentially step forward. And I do love Bateman this week. Like Bateman, if you're in a smaller format, it's probably not anything you got to worry about. But if you're playing in a large format, like the FFPC, the NFFC, he's mostly been picked up in those formats. But he is available more than I would expect. I'll just put it that way. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I mean, I grabbed him multiple times last week. He wasn't available on the team that we have together, Ian. But yeah, I love Bateman. But yeah, for Sanders and Kirk, and look, Kirk has upside, man. He leads the team in air yards. He leads the team in end zone targets. He's second on the team on 3rd and 4th down targets. So he's playing from the slot almost all the time. He's out there for 70 to 80% of the routes in a good offense. So, I mean, Christian Kirk right now, right now he's wide receiver 20. So, I mean, I know it's weird. Like, I just put out a tweet earlier because I went and looked on Fantasy Pros just because I like to see, okay, how often, and I know it's obviously, self-explanatory because that's what you look at to determine who we're going to talk about in the segment. When I saw, I'm like, how is this possible? Like, how is he available this often? He's wide receiver 15 right now. He's had a wide receiver. He's had a 10, a 54, and a 20 finish. Right. So, yeah, I mean, he's out there. He's got 18% of the targets and a good offense, targeted on 20% of his routes, got an ADOT of 16, air yards 34% for the team, end zone targets 38% for the team. 35% of his targets come on play action. That's slightly better than average for a wide receiver. And we talk about how play action targets are actually worth about 10 to 20% more than non-play action targets. So Christian Kirk's just got a lot of really great things going for him. I would actually rank him ahead of Emmanuel Sanders. Like, if I was doing this list, I would say it's Christian Kirk, then Emmanuel Sanders, then Terrace Marshall, and then some of the other guys I know you haven't really gotten into yet that we can chat through.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was thinking the same, where Kirk and Sanders are the top two that you can feel good about. I mean, we're talking about Josh Allen and Kyler Murray's number 2 receiver, seemingly. At some point, I do expect Hopkins to pull away in a lot of these metrics, but either way, it's closer than it was last year, and it makes sense now that the Cardinals can enable more than one guy. By the way, I did get around to watching the Cardinals game. A.J. Green got like a 45-yard catch on a complete duck of a deep ball that Kyler just chucked up. Hey, credit them for coming down with it, but didn't exactly see the sort of movement from Green that would make me think that we've been wrong on not picking the guy up. So I would say don't be buying low on AJ Green, or buying high, I should say, I guess at this point, because he's burnt Rashod Bateman and a atrocious Jaguars secondary. Like, that is the definition of fool's gold, I believe. People, Sanders, Christian Kirk, Terrence Marshall, he should get some more targets because CMC is sidelined, but man, we got Zylstra being a thing, so I don't think it's ideal. Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs, I think you put it perfectly on our recap pod. If we could combine Edwards and Ruggs into one person, we'd have a weekly high-end fantasy starter. As things stand, though, I just think it's going to be tough to expect more than them than like a Hail Mary kind of flex play. And then Tim Patrick should be getting some more targets here with KJ Hamler, unfortunately set to miss the rest of the season with an ACL. But honestly, man, like Teddy, I think more than often than not, it's going to feature around Courtland Sutton. We still got Noah Fant there. Jerry Jeudy should be back in a few weeks. Tim Patrick, in my opinion, is the best number 4 receiver in the game. I'm just, again, not super pumped about getting too much exposure to a Broncos passing game that I think probably has a little more room to go down versus up. Out of these auxiliary options, Dwain, Marshall, Edwards, Ruggs, Patrick, anyone really, fancy you?
Yeah, if you're looking at rest of the season, I think you're still targeting Bryan Edwards and Ruggs, right, as the players that could give you season for the rest of the season, someone that could grow into a boom type role. I think if you're just looking for a player because you're missing Jerry Jeudy or someone else that's been injured, and you just need a player to get you through the next 2 to 3 weeks, then it's probably Tim Patrick, right? He's just out there more often than the other two. At 22% of the targets yesterday, that's more than either Ruggs or Edwards has seen at any point this season. Targets per route run, 20%. He's working down the field. He owned 44% of the air yards yesterday in that game. So yeah, I like, and 40% of his targets coming on play action. So I mean, he was the number 25 PPR receiver this weekend ahead of the Monday night game. So I like Patrick in a pinch for like 3 to 4 weeks. Once Jeudy comes back, I don't think you're going to be very happy with Patrick because you also still have Noah Fant. And to your point, right, Sutton is there, and I think he's the lead target until Jerry Jeudy's fully healthy. And then we'll see, like, we'll let those two battle it out. It could be a back and forth thing between them. And then it's like, okay, like, Tim Patrick's going to be like the kids at Thanksgiving. It's, how it is. Like, you get to go sit at the little table, after all the adults are at the big table. And then there's the, the little table. Tim Patrick probably be sitting at the little table once Jerry Jeudy comes back. So I think to your point, like, you just don't want to overdo it with fab on a player like Patrick. If you're playing in a deeper format, like, there's not a lot out there. Right. So people will probably get a little bit excited about him, but I would definitely cap my fab at, the 7 to 10% range in the deepest formats. And smaller formats, like, I would definitely go min fab allocation on Tim Patrick if I felt like I needed him.
And quickly, in case people didn't catch, the tongue-in-cheek nature of our Josh Gordon intro, like, Dwain, if we're in a 16-man league and you just need wide receiver help and you have a bench spot, I guess, but do not spend a single fab dollar on Josh Gordon, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can spend a min bid on him if you want to do a min fab.
You could do a single dollar, but not more.
Yeah. No, like, if you want to go 2 to 5% because you're in a deep league and that floats your boat, I'm not gonna argue with you. It is the Kansas City Chiefs offense. I don't think you'll get him for that. If you're in a league where Josh Gordon, that's deep enough that Josh Gordon's going to matter, my guess is that typically players like this that people can reminisce about and they can think back to the good old days, they over allocate fab on, almost always. And so if you're playing in a lot of high stakes leagues, I mean, look, it's just the fact of the matter. You're playing with a lot of older dudes that have a bunch of money. And they remember Josh Gordon. They're going to bid too much money on Josh Gordon. So just let them do it. But you can throw some min fab dollars out there at him. It's not the worst thing you'll ever do. Again, it's the Chiefs offense. So it could be the one time, Ian, where we look up and be like, wow, we said screw Josh Gordon for years. And then now look at him with Patrick Mahomes. Look, Patrick Mahomes targets DeMarcus Robinson and he tries to get the ball to McCole Hardman. I mean, I could easily see Josh Gordon eventually being, the third best option on the team. I just don't know what it's worth.
Yeah. One could imagine. I'll be rooting for Josh, rooting for CPAT, Auden Tate, all my freaking guys again and again and again. Love to see it. Now, will someone just go sign Duke Johnson and the whole squad will finally be back employed in the NFL? Let's finish things off, Dwayne, with some tight end darts here. Mike Gesicki is facing the Colts, just had a ton of new usage with Jacoby Brissett. Not necessarily something we should anticipate continuing, but then again, new quarterback under center, maybe it does make sense that Gesicki is going to be a little bit more involved. We got Gerald Everett versus the 49ers. Again, we talked about this on the breakdown pod, but everything's starting to go Everett's way in terms of snaps. He is pulling away from Will Dissly, it seems like. So I think Everett probably has the best season-long outlook out of these guys. Also got Tyler Conklin versus the Browns. As long as Kirk needs to continue throwing the ball, one of these guys, whether it's Conklin, Osborne, or the running back, will be a solid number 3 receiver more weeks than not. And then we also have Dawson Knox against the Texans. Good stat from PFF's own Andrew Erickson about Knox, 78% route run rate, trailing only Logan Thomas, Travis Kelce, Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller, Cole Kmet, George Kittle, Mark Andrews, and TJ Hawkinson last week. So he is right there with those guys now. Obviously, the Bills' passing game can put up plenty of points in a hurry. So out of these guys, Dwayne, I guess I'd probably be ranking them Everett. For this week only, I think I'd be down to drink the Gesicki juice a little bit more. And then after that, Knox and Conklin, barely. I think it's a better group like than we're used to kind of seeing here. You obviously have your pitfalls with each, but do you feel about right with that? Everett should still be the target, just like we said last week.
Yeah, he's the one that's going to be available the most often. But I would say Gesicki is the one. So he and Everett, their utilization is very similar, right? I mean, Everett barely edges him out at 72% routes run per dropback on the season, and you got 68% for Gesicki, but a player that's been targeted more, right, in recent weeks. So if you look at Gesicki, his targets have gone from 11% to 15% to 28%. So that 15% was basically with Jacoby Brissett playing, I want to say 85% of the snaps week 2 because Tua got hurt pretty early, and then a full week last week. And going back and looking, wow, I mean, Brissett just really peppered the middle and underneath areas of the field, which was Jalen Waddle and Mike Gesicki. Now, Gesicki did get, he had a couple of nicer catches down the field, but overall his average depth of target was only 7.3 when he's usually up around 10 or 12 for his career. So I do think Gesicki is number 1. I do believe he will still be complete Jekyll and Hyde on your ass, and I cannot tell you when it's going to happen. I just can't. I've been doing the utilization report for, this is year 4 now, year 2 with PFF. But Gesicki has been a player that has baffled me for years. Like every time I thought there was a trend like the one I just gave you, because I know some poor listener is going to hear 11%, 15%, 28%, Mike Gesicki. No. Every time I've done that and I've gone to like get the pom-poms out, I totally get the stiff arm the next week, get the Heisman from Mike Gesicki, and he blanks everyone. And, and I feel bad because I'm included in it. So don't overthink it, but I would still have him at the top. Gerald Everett, I would have as my number 2. Conklin, I would have as my number 3. So I'm in the same order as you so far. And then I would have Knox, yes, as my number 4. Conklin, over the last 2 weeks, similar thing, right? Now, his routes are worse than the other two, 62%, 66%, and 60%. So he's at 63% on the year. But remember, Conklin hurt his hamstring towards the end of the preseason.
That's right.
And he was battling that. So I do wonder, are we starting to see a healthier Conklin? Yesterday, they game planned to get Conklin the ball. He was targeted on 33% of his routes. He had 33% of the end zone targets. They were throwing him bubble-like screen plays. I don't know if you saw that one, Ian, but he starts off on the outside and he runs kind of this quick, kind of not a bubble, it was more like a tunnel, like this tunnel kind of screen thing.
Kirk's ADOT is super low right now, so I think you're right. Like they are actually designing some of these quick hitters for their guys.
Yeah, so so if you look at it, his targets have gone from 9% to 14% to 22%. He's at 15% on the year. So, you could argue that Conklin, even though he's running less routes, because we're seeing a decent trend with his targets and his targets per route run, which have went from 11% to 17% to 33%, that he should be the target rather than Everett. I am interested to see what happens with Tyler Lockett's practice participation this week. I know he ended up back in that game, but I think that's another potential out for Gerald Everett, right? That's another door that opens, that if you have no Tyler Lockett, I think Everett, like if we had to place money in, right, we would say Everett's going to be the number 2 player in the passing game behind DK Metcalf would be my guess. Yeah. So you guys will have to chew on that one a little more. I wouldn't blame you for going either way between those 2 players. It's really close, but you should be happy to roster either if you're really hurting at tight end. And then, yeah, Dawson Knox, comes in last. The nice thing, though, is 78% of the routes each of the last 2 weeks, and we've never really seen that before from Dawson Knox in his career. It's been much lower than that. His targets are not great. 9%, 11%, 12%. But remember, people, this is the pass-heaviest offense in the league. So once you do the math, those targets come out similar to some of the other guys that we've talked about that are in heavier run offenses, that the raw target numbers themselves are pretty close. So Dawson Knox is a nice ancillary, prize, I guess, if you miss out on one of the top 3.
People, just to summarize what we just went over real quick, top 2 waiver wire recommended ads by position: quarterback Derek Carr, number 1, Sam Darnold, number 2, running back Chuba Hubbard, number 1, Zack Moss, number 2, wide receiver Christian Kirk, number 1, Emmanuel Sanders, number 2, and at tight end Mike Gesicki, number 1, just by a hair. We'll even go 1A Mike Gesicki, 1B Gerald Everett to
and don't forget Bateman. If you guys are in a super deep format, like Bateman and Gallup were 2 great call-outs by Ian.
Yeah. Bateman, Gallup, get in there, get him in that IR spot. Can't hurt the squad. And people, I just hope you know that NFL Week 3 is in the books, which means PFF has data grades for every single player who logged a snap last week. What can you get with the PFF sub? Well, you can get all of PFF's locked article content, including Dwayne's utilization report that should be up on the website by the time you're listening to this podcast. Truly one of the best articles you can read every week in the industry. We also got PFF's NFL and college football betting dashboards, 0 to 100 grades of every single player, including the top rookies on every team. You like betting props? Well, I hope you do. They're fun to bet. Player prop tool, which shows plus minus value for every NFL prop and more. So check out the highest graded players from week 3 and look to find early value on spreads and picks and player props for week 4 with a PFF subscription. And also, people, DraftKings Sportsbook, gotta love it. We're going to week 4 and to kick off another action-packed week. DraftKings is giving new customers $150 instantly when they bet just $1 on any football game. Listen up, because you don't want to miss this. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF to receive $150 in free bets when you place a $1 bet in any football game. That's promo code PFF this week. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit and $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. And finally, people, just want to note the Fantasy Football Podcast is sponsored by Western and Southern Financial Group. While you focus on your roster moves, Western and Southern helps advance your money moves. Buying your first home, plan to start a family, wondering how to make your money grow? Western and Southern's playbook of life insurance, investment, and retirement solutions helps you rest assured on game day. So team up to identify your needs and address your goals with a game plan built just for you. Get started at westernsouthern.com/PFF. Dwayne, this is like the part of the week where we talk for a good 4 or 5 hours over the course of like 40 of them. We'll be right back tomorrow with the game-by-game breakdown, so people can find your utilization report on PFF.com. Any final things you want to get off your chest?
No, man. I just got to get back to writing. So you guys can have the utilization report late tonight or early tomorrow, whichever we can get to.
We finished the Sunday pod, and I asked you the same thing, and you're like, I'm just trying to wake up early to start writing. We'll get a more fun answer after Friday's injury pod, perhaps, but you never know. That's life over here at PFF. For Dwayne, I'm Ian. Thank you as always for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast, and until next time, take care, everybody.